on her Twitter, I think, and all of a sudden, inexplicably, I don't even understand.
I don't either.
How this happened. There was she hashtagged it with the reference to another Marvel writer who had just passed away, earlier this in the summer of 2017, and it's just a picture of 7 ladies having milkshakes, and all of a sudden, like there's like this stream of comments and like messages calling her a fake geek girl or a social justice warrior, and I don't even understand, like where does this even come from? And I posted this on the Two Geek Soup Facebook page and said something like, I really hope that none of our listeners are such basement dwelling troglodytes like these people. But if any of you know somebody who would be tempted to write this kind of thing in response to something like that, you just need to be smacked.
Oh my goodness.
Like, is there in your, I don't know, like in your experience as someone who interacts with pop culture, like do you have any idea like how, where this thing comes from?
Yeah, in pop culture I feel like it's slightly different. I don't know. As I will reference to, in the later podcasts, I wouldn't call myself a geek, so I'm not sure if in those circles if it would be a different answer. So I haven't fully, come across that kind of person in pop culture, but I don't know. It could be just like I was reading a little bit too, and just I guess it's the comic book world, and I know that's not. I hate to make a generalization, but I don't know. People don't think girls belong in comics. I don't understand why, but there's a group of people who think that. I don't know why. So. Yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Well, okay. There's that.
Yeah.
Let's move on. And we're moving on to something a lot more interesting, I hope. We're going to talk today about Age of Ultron, the second Avengers film, also directed by Joss Whedon, like the first one was. And I was really excited about this one. I remember seeing the very first teaser for this movie, and it was just like some sound clips from some of the other Marvel films, and it slowly the camera slowly pulled back to show like just this very recognizable like Ultron face. Kind of like just lifted straight out of the comics. And that was really cool because Ultron has been one of the most enduring villains in the Avengers comic books for decades at this point already. And the story in the movie definitely diverges significantly from the comics lore, where he was actually created by Hank Pym. Who we meet, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Ant-Man movie, and who doesn't have anything to do with his creation in the MCU. But that whole story is very twisted and convoluted, and not something that we're going to get into right now. But Ultron has been a thorn in the side of the Avengers for a long, long time, and so to see him. Brought into the MCU was really exciting, especially since Joss Whedon was going to continue to be in the director's chair and wrote the second Avengers film as well. One of the things that I found really interesting in this movie actually came at the end. It was like during the end credits. When the end credits are the first part of the end credits are coming up over this sort of montage of like this big sculpture, this marble statue that portrays all of the characters in the film. And it kind of brings home this idea that superheroes really are the myths of the modern day. Like, this is what we have, instead of like all of the Greek and Roman gods, who were sort of, were the main characters of the stories of the pop culture of that day. Like, we have comic book superheroes, and to see that kind of visualization of the heroes in that kind of medium, sort of the marble statue, just like you would see, something from ancient Greece, was really interesting to me. As someone who is not as versed in the comics lore, Marilette, what was your reaction to the movie? We're going to talk about the Black Widow thing a little bit later. Just give me some general impressions that you had when you saw this film.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you get multiple superheroes together, you kind of get a picture of teamwork, obviously, and I just can't help it. Like, even when I watch Arrow, it's somewhat related, but I love seeing people using their different gifts together. I don't know, it's just a picture of the church to me. Like, we were referred to as a body in the Bible, and just seeing, I just think that's a personal, I love seeing people's different individual gifts come together. So I love exactly what you said about how this is a parallel to Greek, to myth. It's so easy. And so, again, I work with youth, and it's so easy to just be like, oh, did you watch that movie, the superhero movie? And you can just so easily go into spiritual themes, and just, again, like watching any kind of film that has to do with, teamwork and stuff like that. It's really encouraging for me to see. And even the fact that whenever someone has a weakness, it gets covered by the team members. So, I just think I love Marvel's, like, they always put in the sense of humor in the right places, Like, you're getting a deep movie, but then, like, you get the release of, comic relief at the right time. So, yeah.
And as you mentioned, the whole teamwork aspect, that just brings to mind, like, the very first sequence in the film, when, I guess it's not the very first sequence, but one of the opening sequences when they're running that raid on the Hydra base in Sokovia, and that incredible, like, single take.
Oh yeah,
sequence where you get all of the heroes are highlighted again. And you get to, all of their powers are just showcased, and you just see them all flying around and doing their thing, and it was just so cool.
Yeah.
And all of them do cool things. I think for me, one of the things that I most enjoy seeing visualized in these movies is the way that Captain America fights. I love seeing him throwing his shield around all over the place. I think it's been realized very, very effectively. And everything else is really cool, but Thor is gonna bang stuff with his hammer, and he's gonna shoot lightning at stuff, and that's great. And Iron Man's gonna fly around and zap stuff with his repulsors, and that's cool. And Black Widow and Hawkeye, they're gonna assassinate people, and that's very fine. But with Captain America, just it definitely. It definitely tickles that sort of, like, very fanboy thing for me, because, like, obviously, like, I think more than most of the other characters, if you don't execute Captain America properly, it could just be profoundly silly.
Yeah.
And I'm really, I love the way that they've managed to do that.
Yeah.
When I remember reading some things as this film was coming out, and with Joss Whedon saying that he wanted this to be a more personal, film, that he wanted the story to be more personal than the first one. How it was sort of the big spectacled, like, giant alien invasion kind of thing, and we didn't have a lot of time to really dig into more of these characters. And obviously, we're talking about Joss Whedon, so there's going to be a lot of great character work going on to start with anyway. Mm-hmm. But we get into some really personal things in this film. Let's talk for a minute about Hawkeye's family.
Yeah.
That was that's a real departure from the comics as well. I really like the. I noticed it when I rewatched it here another time, and I think I didn't really catch it the first time when he's talking on the phone with his wife before you know that it's his wife, and he's saying. He says negative. I answer to you, in response, presumably to something about her saying that he has people at S.H.I.E.L.D. that he has to answer to, and I really like that a portrayal of a family where the family does come first, and irrespective of how important this guy's work is. He knows that his first priority is his family.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that.
Yeah. That was definitely a highlight for me, their family.
It was such a fun moment when they show up there at the farmhouse and everyone is just totally bamboozled. What's going on here? And Tony is like, well, these are obviously smaller agents, just really good stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm glad that happened. And obviously, they're based on just the kind of story that those characters have going on in the films, it would have been very easy for there just to have been some kind of relationship between Hawkeye and Black Widow.
Yep.
And I think that's what a lot of people were expecting. And and I've said this before and I'll say it again now that that subversion of expectations is something that is really well done in Marvel films. Tyler Smith and I were talking about Iron Man 3 a couple episodes ago, and we were saying just how great it is to not really, or to have something unexpected happen in a big franchise, because these are the kinds of things where typically it's all very by the numbers, and not a lot that's really unpredictable happens. And in Iron Man 3, obviously the big thing was the way that they chose to go with the Mandarin. But later on, when I get around to talking about Civil War, I think I mentioned this with one of my other co-hosts. I was 100% ready for Captain America to die in Civil War, because that's the way that it goes in the comics, and it makes a lot of sense in that context. And then in the aftermath of that in the comics, then Bucky takes up the mantle of Captain America for a while. And I was like, okay, that makes total sense, because he was introduced in Winter Soldier. He's a central player in Civil War. And so they're setting him up to take up the mantle of Captain America here, because something I knew, some meta knowledge that I had is that he has a 9-picture deal with Marvel.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it made sense to me that okay, they're setting him up now. He's going to be Captain America because maybe Chris Evans wants to do something else other than be Captain America all the time. So that's
I didn't know all that.
That was fun.
I'm not a true geek here.
That's right.
But the fact that they seamlessly did that, and nothing that would have been a red flag to me that seemed, that it didn't work. So
yeah, No, and again, and this is something, again, that I've said before, like the way that they make story deviations in the movies from the source material while still staying true to the core of who these characters are is something that these Marvel movies absolutely just excel at all over the